on the 23rd of July, it was announced that the Assistant Secretary of State for South and Central Asia, Donald Liu, announced that Central Asia is one of the top priorities for America, specifically within the sphere of media. How do you assess the US's strategy towards vying for this influence here in the region? How do you see them getting involved with the local media and the press?
Yeah, I think the US, being a superpower, presently try to step into each region of the world and try to have influence over across the world. But it's not that easy, of course, in Central Asia region because Central Asia is basically it is a region which has been traditionally ally of China and Russia. It is the natural ally of China and Russia because if you look at Central Asia location-wise, geographically, or if you look at Central Asia region culturally, or if you have a look at the socio-economic demographic, persona, so it is the natural ally of the China-led or the Russia-led bloc, rather US-led bloc. And this is the reason the US push and Donald Lu, the Assistant Secretary of State, pushed to put in some money in the media arena in Central Asia. But this is just a strategy for some time being, and it will not be an easy task for the US to get it implemented across the region because the China and Chinese and Russian influence is already set up over there. It is already a set thing over there in the region. This is not a new, and it has been there for decades. So it will not be easy for US to just step in and to reduce the China and Russia led influence and then have its own over there. So it's not going to be a cakewalk for US, but yeah, of course, it will somehow have some result because the moment you pump in, you start pumping in money. So of course, one way or other, it works.
Thank you so much for inviting me to speak on such an important issue about US Central Asian relations. From my point of view, I don't think that US has any real influence in Central Asia, and that's why they try to figure out any particular spheres where they actually could gain more influence to reach their own aims in Central Asia. So I think the most important aim for the US is to get access to raw materials and also minerals of the region and also get any chance to mine it. That's why I think public perception plays a crucial role. For instance, if people have like negative attitude towards US or China, they can always go on strike or protest against any rapprochement between, let's say, Kazakhstan and the US. And I think that, like as Lou mentioned, they want to launch some project to counter Russian and Chinese disinformation. I think that US I think that decision makers in the US they feel particular, let's say, resilience maybe from people of Kazakhstan towards any projects which will be pursued or like promoted by US in the region.
And Rehan, from your previous statements, it seems like you don't really think that there is much competition. What do you think China and Russia will do to push back against US influence here in the region?
I think Russia and Chinese led bloc would not just start and would start sponsoring some kind of initiative to counter this new US policy. I think they will take some time and they will just wait and watch because it is US who is at the receiving end in the region. It is US who is trying to get in. It is US who is trying to have its own influence over Central Asian media because China and Russian influence is always already there and it has been there for decades. So it is the US who is at the receiving end, not China and Russia. So China and Russia would be in a position to just wait and watch, and then if they successfully manage to maintain their present influence, I think it will be a win situation for Russia and China-led bloc, because it is the US who is just trying to pitch to just put in some few $1 billion and to have its own influence, or to make this media kind of pro-US media. But it is not. It will not be easy. Let me just make it make it by an example. So you might have heard about the Trans-Caspian International Transport Corridor. So this is a corridor which was proposed by European and US-led bloc. It is a Western project basically to counter BRI. And US, Europe, and international financial organizations pledged $11 billion for the same. But as it is started, not yet. Because the BRI is already there in place in across the region, and even further, it goes up to Turkey. It is there across the region, then Afghanistan, then Middle East, then Iran, and then goes up to Africa and Turkey. So this Eastern world, including South Asia, Central Asia, Middle East, West Asia, and Caucasus. So this is a entire area is a Chinese-led bloc area, you can say, or an area where Russia and China has an edge in comparison to US. And this world is tilting towards US, tilting against and away from US and towards China and Russia bloc. So it will not be an easy and any cakewalk thing for US led world.
What about you, Eldaniz? Do you have a similar thought or do you disagree?
Yes, I have an opposite opinion regarding the issue of information space of Central Asian countries, especially of Kazakhstan. So, according to research of the Central Asian Barometer, Kazakhstan is the only country which actually has a more negative attitude, I mean, perception of the war in Ukraine than any other country of Central Asian region. So I think this is the reason why actually US tried to concentrate itself more on Kazakhstan rather than on any other Central Asian countries. So actually after the beginning of the war, we could see that there were some projects from any American NGOs to research more Chinese and Russian influence in Kazakhstan and also in Uzbekistan, and also trying to somehow figure out how powerful is Russia in, let's say, how they define the propaganda in the region, especially by promoting Russian narratives about the war or about the American presence in the region. So we can also actually pay attention more to some particular social media like Telegram. As I mentioned, there was notable growth of particular Telegram channels which actually also promote, let's say, pro-Russian narratives in the region. Like in Telegram, you can also maybe see it on Instagram and also on YouTube. Some new faces, some new bloggers who try to also speak somehow negatively about any European and American presence in the region. I can actually also say it about almost all countries of the region, maybe with the exception of Turkmenistan. So also when it comes to China, we can also see like growing Chinese presence in the region. So I remember experts of the region used to say that we should not think about, or like, let's say, overestimate Chinese soft power in the region, like it's underdeveloped, or it doesn't really, it can't actually really influence perception of Central Asian people. But now I actually also see that we have some new China-backed or China-supported institutions in the region. Also, like more positive articles in Kazakh, at least in Kazakh medias, about China and Chinese development, or about Chinese initiatives like Common Destiny of Mankind. It's also like one of the Chinese initiatives which China actively promotes in Central Asia, and also Central Asian leaders agreed like to have a joint like actions to promote this initiative in the region further. As when it comes to technological modernization of China and also promotion of these ideas among Central Asians. So actually one of the regions where we can see like a part of competition in the information space is Kazakhstan, since Kazakhstan is quite open to any foreign investments in the mining sector. It's actually, as far as I know, there was some joint projects between Kazakhstan and US to find new, explore new places where you can actually extract some minerals. As far as I know, in Kostanay Oblast, for example, there was one of the projects using some American technologies, some space American technology to find out these places. And also, like, I think that, as I told you, people's perception is more diversified than in any other country in the region. So that's why I actually see like more growing competition, namely in Kazakhstan. And also we have some part of polarization between people. Like I also consider it like between north and south of the country, but I also should like make more research on that. But it's one of my own assumption about the country.
Well, then, what do you think are the possible long term implications of this rivalry here? Do you think it will shift towards something more tangible? Like we see or we've heard reports of a military base in Tajikistan belonging to China. Do you see perhaps Russia and the US moving to establish their own bases here? Or any other forms of countering this?
Yeah, so I can partly agree with Rehan regarding land connectivity among the SCO members and how they also could maybe perceive any external threat for this connectivity. I mean, like as you know, like in 2022, if I'm not mistaken, Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin met in Moscow, and they also like signed a declaration that any, let's say, co-revolutions possess particular threat for the stability of Central Asian countries and so on. So maybe some of the leaders of the SCO, they, like, let's say, they perceive a threat coming from, let's say, from the West, or like supporting any, let's say, movements, protests, like co-revolutions, which also took place in several post-Soviet countries, which led to a change of ruling elites, like in Ukraine or like let's say in any other country. And they also like see the threat for the connectivity among all the countries. So they are all interested to promote this land connection, actually as an opposition to any, like say, sea connections, which also let's say under, like, could be more controlled by, let's say, Western alliances rather than by the SCO countries, as like US and as a navy power. I mean, like the most powerful country when it comes to navy. The same like all about the other any other Western countries, and also like Malak Strait. And I mean, like you are quite aware of all of these things and talks. Another thing is, as you mentioned, also Chinese military base in Tajikistan. I'm not quite sure about it because there was some other announcement that it's actually disinformation or it's false information. So I need also to prove that. But as I think, yesterday there was some air exercises and drills between China and Russia over Alaska. It's the first time when both countries have such joint exercises, like to tackle any American influence, military influence. And I think it's a bad dream for Americans. If you read, for example, Mackinder and his book about Heartland and about access in Eurasia, he wrote that the most threatful thing for the Great Britain is the approachment between Germany and Russia, and the Great Britain should take any measures so that it doesn't happen, or it didn't happen. The same, like, because Germany is a technological power and Russia has a lot of resources. Now we have another thing. We have now two land powers like Russia and China, which have a huge rapprochement, which are ready to cooperate and to tackle any growing US and EU influence in the region, like Central Asia or in any other regions of Eurasia. And I think it's also like it's a threat for American power in the world, and they can actually try to find any places, also like an information space, to tackle or maybe to create any conflicts between both Russia and China so that both compete. So in the last time, we can also consider, let's say not a huge number, but some particular talks between American experts about possible competition between China and Russia in Central Asia. So it's actually one of the things where you can actually create or maybe, yes, support any perception among Russian and Chinese elites that they can actually compete for the influence in Central Asia, and it will have a ripple effect on the rapprochement between China and Russia, let's say against US or the European Union. So I'm quite worried if that could happen, that actually Russia and China will start compete each other in Central Asia. But as, for example, John Mersheimer told in his book, Big Power Trilogy, it can happen. Like you have a multipolar world order, and actually, in such circumstances, big powers tend to compete with each other. Let it be Russia or China with each other, or like against US or EU, when they, for example, influence the worldwide good, like deny or like wine. So I think this situation with Chinese military base in Tajikistan is it's a good example of how maybe US would also promote or like speak more about any growing Chinese presence in traditional Russian like space, in traditional Russian region, like security. Like having Chinese military base means that Russia cannot be perceived as the only security guarantor in Central Asia. And Russian elites can perceive it as a particular threat for the own influence in Central Asia, trying maybe somehow to influence Tajik, let's say, authorities not to have such a military base on the territory of Tajikistan. If you can understand what I try to explain.
Yeah, so I think, we must look at the things in a broader way and in a geopolitical landscape because as far as the bilateral relations are concerned of Central Asian nations and the US, so the multilateral relations also comes in. It goes hand in hand. So what happening in the world today cannot be ignored, and the Western nation, how Western nation um, strongly stand behind Israel, and this talks about something. And if you look at the Central Asian nations, which are Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan, these all five nations, first they have been a traditional ally of Russia, who is the strong enemy of US, and also tilting toward China. So these five nations strategically and traditionally ally with the China-led bloc, not the US-led bloc. And especially in the wake up of this whole scenario that has been building up after October 7 Israel-Palestine war. So in this war, how strongly the US is supporting Israel. So technically, the Central Asian nation further tilt toward China-led bloc and Russia-led bloc, or rather US-led bloc. So in going ahead, in going further in the future, there is a high possibility of tilting Central Asian nations toward further China-led bloc and going away from the Western-led bloc. And the leaders cannot just the leaders of these Central Asian nations cannot just take the decisions on their own. So no matter whether it's favorable or not, public opinion matters, and public opinion in among all these five nations is predominantly against the US, and it's pro-China because it's the US who stand firmly behind Israel, and and have led to killing of thousands of Palestinians. And this matters most to not only these five Central Asian nations, but also it matters a lot to China-led bloc, and China-led bloc versus US-led bloc. Competition goes on and on from here, and Central Asia is going to play a major role in the same.
Stay tuned for more discussions on these topics. I'm Tony, and this is Dario.